Good morning. It's wonderful to see each and every one of you here today at Unity Christian Church. I always am delighted to have the opportunity to be with you, to join with you. Reverend Monty, it's good to see you. I know it's been a while, but it's good to see you this morning. I'm glad that my wife Emma is with me this morning. And also one of our Open Heart members, Judy Card, who is here. Judy is a member of our prayer team. Every morning at 8 a.m. Central Time, we have an affirmative prayer that takes place for about 7 minutes on phone. And Judy is one of our prayer team members, and she offers the prayer for us on Thursdays. And I'm glad to have her with me today. A lot of times, well, I don't know, but I do know that she let me know one time we are both cat lovers, and I was doing double duty today, Open Heart. We have our Heart stream that is streamed on YouTube and Facebook at 10 a.m. And so I was back in the office streaming it. And one time Judy sent me a picture of her cat Oscar, who was sitting with her watching the Heart stream. So I know that probably Oscar watched it. She couldn't, well, she might have been able to bring Oscar today, but anyway, she's shaking her head no. But I'm glad to see Judy with me. And so many of you that are here today also that are not really strangers, that I do have friendships with and that I know and have enjoyed over the years, knowing you and getting to know you. This morning, you might remember the last time that I was here and I had actually given Coretta the title for my message. But when I got up here, I changed it. I'm known for doing that. But this morning, I'm sticking to the script. I'm sticking to the message that I had said that I was going to deliver. I know last month that was going to be the message, but we all know when Snowmageddon came in and we weren't able to get around, and certainly understand that. But I'm just glad to be here this morning. I am glad. Aren't you glad to be here this morning? Yes. Yes. It's another great day, another great opportunity. So the title of this message is Hurling Stones of Truth. Hurling Stones of Truth. And I want to ask you a question this morning. That is, what is your Goliath? What is your Goliath? Now, you might be saying, what do you mean? I'm so glad you asked. Many of us are familiar with the story in 1 Samuel chapter 17. We know this story about David, who was a young shepherd, who was caught in the middle of a battle between his people, the Israelites, and the Philistines. And every day, they would come out to this location. And on one side, on one hill, would be the Israelites, and on the other side would be the Philistines. And there was a man whose name was Goliath. And Goliath, the Philistine champion, was described as being someone who was huge, someone who had strong and amazing capabilities. And Goliath would walk in between the gatherings of the Philistine soldiers and the Israelite soldiers, and he would taunt the Israelites. He would insult them. He would say things about their God. He would say things about them. He would challenge them in many, many different ways as he walked back and forth, insulting them. And he continued to do this day after day. But because Goliath had the reputation that he had, because he was so big and strong in the manner that he was, nobody on the Israelites dared to challenge him. So they just stood there and they took it because of the way in which he approached things there. And David one day came there because his father was concerned about David's other brothers, because David had been off tending sheep, which is what his calling was at that particular point in life. And so he sent them food by David so David could also check on them. And David, as he got there, he heard Goliath. He heard him taunting the people. He heard them talking about their God. He heard Goliath saying all of these things. And David was, first of all, he was confused. How are they going to let this man walk up and down and say stuff about them the way that he's doing? And the second thing was he got offended by the fact that he was saying things about them that he didn't quite believe. And he just couldn't believe that they would allow Goliath to go on and on and on. And so the thing is that there was nobody that they could find among the Israelites that would take on Goliath. And so finally, David, even though he was a young boy at the time, said, I'll do it. I'm not going to stand here and I'm not going to allow this man to say the things about us the way that he does. And so David goes to the king, Saul, and he tells him, nobody else will come forth and challenge Goliath, so I will. Now Saul was amazed and amused by what David had to say. So Saul said, well, if you're going to go and face Goliath, and I think he thought that David was just being an impetuous youth, an impetuous young man. But he said, well, if you're going to, you could at least put on my armor. So he took his armor and he put it on him. And it was too big. And so finally, David, when he realizes that it was too big, he takes it off. And David decided that I know what I'm going to do. I'm a shepherd. I'm a shepherd boy. And one of the things that I do when I'm out tending my sheep, in order for us to remain safe, in order for me to keep the predators off the sheep, I have my slingshot. And I use stones, among other things, including my staff, to make sure this is happening. So David gets 5 smooth stones, and he puts them in a satchel, and then he goes to meet Goliath. And as David stands there looking at Goliath, Goliath was amused also by what David had come to challenge him. And he starts to scoff at David. He starts to talk about David now. But David remains undaunted. He takes the sling and he puts 1 stone in it and he hurls it and it strikes Goliath and it kills him. And then David takes Goliath's sword and he uses it to cut Goliath's head off. Now, I started out asking the question again. What is your Goliath? What is your Goliath? Because I want to say that rather than looking at this story as just some type of historical thing that may or may not have happened in the past, I want us to go and to look at this and not as being a battle that happened long ago, but this being a battle, a psychological or spiritual battle that happens for each of us. Did I say each of us? Something that happens for each of us on a regular basis. That you and I have Goliaths in our lives. Amen, somebody. Those things that loom large in our lives that we could say are our Goliaths. And when we get in touch with the fact that all of us, each of us, no matter who we are, no matter what we look like, no matter where we've been through, no matter what we've been through, no matter where we've been, no matter what we know, none of those other things that we sometimes will think, because we can look at a person and think because they have particular aspects in their lives, whether it's material things or whether it's achievements or whether it's appearance or anything else, has got it all together. All of us in some shape or form have a Goliath, if not one, more than one, in our lives. And so the battle here is not between David and Goliath, but it's between the worlds of facts versus the world of truth. The world of facts versus the world of truth. And there's something important for us to remember as I take us there. We have to get a hold of this. Facts change, but truth remains. Facts change, but truth remains. So when you read this story, it's important to see that the author of the text goes into great detail in describing Goliath. He talks about how large Goliath is, how tall Goliath is, how strong Goliath is, because he carried a spear that was massive with a point that was heavy, and he wore armor that was thick and heavy. And I don't think it was any accident that he went into great detail to describe how formidable and how opposing the Goliath was, because when we look at this, when we look at the Goliaths in our lives, don't they seem big? Don't they seem massive? Don't they seem immense? See, your Goliath, and that would be a problem that looms in your perception, that dominates your whole horizon and your whole viewpoint. A person who's in an unhappy relationship, the only thing that they can see at that moment is their unhappiness. The only thing that they can see are the things that are going wrong. A person who is experiencing illness, is that in that moment, the only thing that they can see in that moment, the only thing they can think about in that moment is their diagnosis, is the illness, is their aches and pains. If a person is going through financial issues, then in that moment, the only thing they can see is that lack that they feel, that lack that they have in life, that thing that they look at, the fact that the money is not there. They, as you call it, money is funny and change is strange and credit won't get it, But these things loom large in our life. Our Goliath is massive. Our Goliath is formidable. Our Goliath is there. And one of the things that happens for us, we give those things power. We give them power. We make them grow into giant proportions, not in and of themselves, but it's our perception that makes them as big as they are. It's our perception that blows them up. It's our perception that gives them strength. It's our perception. It's the way that we look at things. It's the way that we conceive of things. It's the way that we see things in our lives. And I get it. I understand, because if you're going through a relationship problem, that is going to be what you are focused on and what you see. If you're experiencing illness, that will be something that is happening. If there's lack and limitation in your life, that's going to be what's looming. I get it. If you are having dissatisfaction in your career choice or whatever else it might be, I get it. I understand those things. And what happens is, just as this description of Goliath gets built up, our description gets built up, and that happens in our lives. And I think about a particular time when going back to sickness and going back to illness. I was visiting a member in the hospital, and I was sitting there in the room with her husband, and the doctor came in, and the doctor began to share good news. He was telling her that the tests that they had run, the results were favorable. He was looking at her other vital statistics. Things were going well. It was good news. And, they allowed me to sit in there while he was talking to her, but he was telling her all of these good things. But what I noticed was a few minutes later, when some family members got there who weren't there when the doctor came, that as she told them what the doctor said, her symptoms got worse. And somebody called on the phone, and as she was talking to them, and as she described what was going on with her, rather than the good news that the doctor shared, what she was sharing was something totally different. So much so that it was a certain point where finally her husband looked at me, then he looked at his wife. He said, "Baby, I'm not sure we were in the same room when the doctor came in." But that's what can happen. We can make these things so massive and so large in our lives because we skew the perspective. we have a skewed perception of things. And that was happened. There was a perspective that all of a sudden was here in this particular case, that Goliath would seem large in front of us. But if you stand Goliath in front of a mountain, not so large, not so large, not so much. The world of facts tell us that Goliath was large and massive. The world of facts tell us this something ain't right. The world of facts tell us that I'm not feeling well. We've got a diagnosis. We've got a prognosis. The world of facts, we look at our bank account. We look at what we have coming in versus what's going out, tells us that there's a problem here. The world of facts will tell us that in this situation and in this circumstance, that my career goals and my relationship goals and my goals in life are there. All of that, that's what the world of facts would tell us. But remember, I said this was a battle between facts versus truth, and that facts change, but truth remains. And it's important for us to get into this idea and this understanding that how you think about yourself, is important. Because ultimately how you think about yourself is what? It's your consciousness. It is your consciousness. At the bottom line, how you think about yourself is your consciousness. It goes into feeding your consciousness. It goes into informing your consciousness. It goes into building up and creating your consciousness. How you think about yourself. And that is important. And that is something that we have to recognize and to realize. And this is something I want us to get. That if you come to situations and circumstances from places other than your divine identity, if you come at situations and circumstances from a place that is other than your divine identity, if you come at a situation and a circumstance from a place that is other than your divine identity, you will produce experiences in line with that. We've heard it in New Thought, Ancient Wisdom, Metaphysics all the time. Thoughts held in mind, what? Produce after their kind. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So if you approach a situation, a circumstance, a person or persons or whatever else from a position other than your divine identity, you're going to run into problems. Amen, lights. Because the universe always says yes. The universe, even if you may forget who you are, the universe always remembers who you are. God always remembers who you are. Source always knows who you are. Source knows your true identity, no matter how obscured it might have gotten, no matter how far down a wrong path you might have gone, no matter whatever else, there is something deep inside of you that always knows who you are, that always knows and always recognizes the truth of who you are. If you've ever tried to take a cork and hold the cork down in water and hold it down and hold it down and hold it down, it's always doing what? It's always trying to rise to the surface. And as soon as you let it do so, it will rise to the surface. And it's the same way that the truth about you, no matter how you might have tried to press it down before, and you press it down oftentimes by accepting what other people say about you. You oftentimes press it down by taking on the things that this world is doing, and how that impacts who you are and all of that. But the truth of who you are never ultimately can be quashed down when you just be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that you are God, and you allow for it to come up. And when you remember your divine identity, when you remember your divine identity, when you remember who you are, then anything other than that disturbs you. Anything other than that begins to get in with you, and you have this cognitive dissonance because the truth knows itself and it recognizes itself in you. And while you are accepting something else or believing something else, the truth will knock on the door and remind you of the truth and remind you of who you are. And that's what happened to David. That's what happened to David. When David first came and saw Goliath and heard the stuff that he was saying to his fellow Israelites, when he heard all of that, it bothered him because he knew that wasn't the truth. And there is something that when people are saying things about us, when things are happening, there is something inside of us that is bothering us. And it is really our reaction to the fact that the truth is not being acknowledged. I know sometimes when people will come to me and they will say certain things, I will have to stand there, and in my mind, I may look as if I'm listening, but I'm really saying that's not my reality. That's not my reality. That's not my reality. Oh, but the economy's bad. That's not my reality. Oh, but everybody's against us. That's not my reality. Oh, you're just getting, oh, that's not my reality. I just keep going on and on and on. That's not my reality, because the truth knows. And as the truth knows, and it recognizes and it realizes that David saw the confrontation and he was bothered. He was disturbed. He might not have realized why at the moment. He might not have known why, but he was disturbed. And you see, David represents remembering our divine identity. From a metaphysical interpretation of this text, David represents remembering our divine identity. Because, see, God is omnipotent. But our point of contact is our consciousness. And so only to the degree, to the level that we can accept this and know this, can we again, as I said, the universe always says yes. And how you think of yourself is acknowledged by the universal principle or God. And so here we go. It's the application of truth, that makes the difference. When we're confronted by things, and remember again, I said before, there's facts, but facts change, and there's truth, and truth remains. And it's the application of truth that makes the difference. I heard one of my teachers say it's the difference between a flashlight and a laser. A flashlight will illuminate, but a laser will penetrate when you apply it. A flashlight will give you surface awareness and surface understanding, but a laser will go through and it will persist. And it's the same thing. If you hold on to the truth, 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 if you hold on to the truth. Somebody finally got me. If you hold on to the truth, it will penetrate. It will penetrate. The truth will penetrate. And so David remembered his divine identity. He remembered his past experiences that prepared him for a situation like this. David remembered that there was something in his background. Even though he was a young man, he remembered that youth didn't determine the fact that there was something that he had already been through. He had already been prepared, because remember again, David was a young shepherd. And David suddenly remembered that while he was out there tending his father's sheep, that when the lions and the bears, there were no tigers, but when the lions and the bears would come and try to threaten the sheep, that David had his slingshot, and David had his tools, and David had been successful at fighting those off in the past. And he also credited the fact that his ability to do this was given to him by God. That it was a God-endowed ability that David had, and he recognized and that he realized this. And so he came to himself, because initially he went to Saul, and Saul said, well, I tell you what, this is what you do. You put my armor on. But Saul's armor didn't fit. And that's another, if we look at it from a metaphysical perspective, that's when we go for outside solutions. That's when we go ask everybody else, well, what do you think? What should I do? That's when you consult other people as if what's outside of us is more important and more knowledgeable than what is inside of us. And that's not to say that resources and information don't come from outside and don't come from other people, but oftentimes those things just don't fit. And I'm also always suspicious of those people who start off their advice, if I were you. And this is what happened when he went to Saul, if I were you. But God, the source, the universal principle, and I'm about to close, and I know preachers say I'm about to close, and they don't, but I am. David went to the river, and he got the Bible says 5 smooth stones. 5 smooth stones. And again, I look at this story, and there were deliberate things that were said about this. 5 smooth stones. Why was it important to emphasize that they were smooth stones? But smooth represents the unadorned truth. Just the simple, plain truth. Doesn't have to be dressed up, doesn't have to look fancy, doesn't have to look like anything else but just the 5 smooth stones, the unadorned truth. That, in other words, as we hear in New Thought Ancient Wisdom, the mental equivalent, the knowing that you know, the knowing that is beyond knowing, the knowing in which we've already done our spiritual work, in which we already can see the outcome that we wish to have, even though there's no evidence at the moment that it could even possibly happen, but we are already there at the end. We are already there. We believe it because we understand this. We understand this truth, that if we can conceive it and believe it, we can achieve it. That's the unadorned truth. The unadorned truth is that clarity and conviction of thinking and feeling, that those things that come into place, that unadorned truth, recognizing, realizing that we are God in expression, that unadorned truth, are recognizing and realizing that in this world we may have tribulation, but we have something within us that has already overcome it, and has shown us and teaches us and guides us in every situation and circumstance, that we already have the power, no matter what might be standing in front of us, no matter what might be in a situation where it is taunting us and trying to call us out of our name and scandalize our name or whatever else it might be. There is something inside of us that is greater, that is more than anything else. And so as David got in touch with that which was within him, and he got those 5 smooth stones, that unadorned truth, just as we could do in whatever situation we are facing. And he took one, he put it in his slingshot, he hurled that stone of truth. It struck Goliath in the temple. Goliath fell over dead, and then he took his sword, Goliath's own sword, and he cut the head off of Goliath. And another reason why that's important is because when he cut the head off Goliath so that Goliath wouldn't live anymore, he couldn't reconnect anymore. His head now was gone. He couldn't reconnect. I can remember years ago, one of my great aunts, I was visiting in Georgia, and I was outside playing at her house, and I ran around back. When I got around back, I was face to face with a snake. The snake was looking at me. I was looking at it. I decided that snake wasn't for me. I ran back and I told my great aunt. She came out the house with a hoe. And she went around, she chopped the snake off, and she made sure that she chopped the head off, and then she buried the head in one place, and she buried the body in another place, so that the snake couldn't reconnect. And I had a cousin that kept teasing me, telling me that the snake was going to come back. But she told me, don't worry about it, because I cut the head off, and it's in one place, and the body's in another. But cutting the head off symbolizes that there was no way to reconnect anymore. There was no way that Goliath was going to continue to exist. And the same thing with Goliath, cutting off Goliath's head, we have to do the same thing with ourselves, with whatever we're facing, whatever truth it is that we've already taken, thrown it, and hurled into that once things have begun to materialize, once things have begun to happen, once things have happened for us, once things are manifesting and unfolding, we can't go back thinking in the old way, in the old pattern. We can't let it reconnect anymore. We have to stand in the truth and to know our truth. And as we stand in our truth and we know our truth and we know that we know that we know that we have become victorious, we have been able to take on the Goliaths in our lives, be able to take on the things that are facing us and trying to daunt us, take on the things that are trying to hold us back, take on the things that have plagued us, and finally declare and to know that we are successful, to know that we are in this place where we have defeated those things, where we have vanquished those things, where we have become victorious in those things, because we have the ability, we have the wherewithal, we have the knowledge of the truth that allows us to stand up to any giant, to stand up to any situation, to stand up to whatever is plaguing us, to stand up whatever is trying to hold us back, to stand up to whatever or whoever is trying to hold us back. We've got the truth, the stones of truth that we throw into each situation and each circumstance. And we recognize and we realize that I am the expression of God in this moment. I am the manifestation of God in this moment. I am that I am. I am empowered and endowed with truth, with ability, with resources, with creativity, with knowledge, with knowing, with understanding, with guidance, with the wherewithal, with everything that I need in this situation to do what it is that I need to do. And I stand here. I claim this truth. I know this truth. I operate from this truth. This is my truth. And it's your truth. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. And so it is.